everybody. Welcome to our Downtown Kiwanis meeting. We'll start out with Mary giving the pledge.
You're getting to be a regular around here.
Pledge?
Before the pledge, I just wanted to ask, you know my connection with the Indians, and I have some tickets in my pocket that we're not able to use this weekend. So I have 3 extra tickets for today's game that started at 12:35, and you could catch a few innings since you've already beat the traffic downtown. I have 4 for Friday night, 7:05 game, and 4 for Sunday. I think it's 1:35. So if anybody can use them, please let me know. And oh, we have our big flag today, so let's do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mary. George?
The invocation. Heavenly Father, let us look to you for help in identifying the problems we can rectify in our community, and guide us in our efforts to administer aid to those in need. Help us to use our time and energy wisely, not to waste it on insignificant matters that benefit no one. And now bless this food to our use and us to your service. Amen.
Thanks, George. Please be seated. I have just a few announcements. First of all, Graham, there you are. Would you like to introduce this?
Yeah. So, food and mouth. Have some terrific friends and terrific Butler supporters here. First of all, Ed Valdataro, who is really probably one of our largest donors to the women's basketball program. Just a great friend of mine. Was talking about him in the car driving down, and not only has he been a great friend and great donor, for me, I always love when we can take an IU graduate and convert them over. And so, but I count him as one of my best friends. Ed, remind me, it's Andrew, correct?
Yes.
And your last name? Okay, and he is a friend of Ed's. Welcome. I've got a great colleague at Butler. We've worked together, I think, about 5 or 6 years, and she's one of those people you can really count on, always follows up, always just sets a very high standard as far as customer service goes. And she runs the show in the women's basketball office. So Sarah Queeby, welcome. And then he is a familiar face, but Dwayne Leatherman has taught at Butler for about 40 years in our math department. Also a tremendous donor to women's basketball, tremendous supporter. And those are my guests here today.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you.
Thanks to many of you, present or not, who have already sent in your dues commitment for this coming year. We of course appreciate all of our members, especially Steve Kessinger, who has been a Kiwanian for 25 years. Is Steve here by chance?
I don't think so.
Steve works with our Young Child Priority 1 program at IPS Center for Inquiry, school number 27. I'm very excited to pass the gavel to Trina and welcome Nancy Ulrichs into the president-elect role for the upcoming 22-23 club year. I'd like to involve as many past presidents as possible at our first meeting for the club year, 2 weeks from today. It would be great if you could reach out to a former president that has been important to your own Kiwanis journey and invite them to join us at that meeting. Applications for the Kiwanis Foundation grants are due on Friday, September 30th. If there is a local community organization that you think could benefit from one of the 2,500 grants for the year 2023, please encourage them to apply and sign off on their application. We will be with the Indiana District during doing a Riley project this coming Sunday afternoon. At that get together, I'll be presenting our check for Riley, our quarterly Magic Castle cart grant check. Money raised at our golf outing supports that initiative. It's not too late to participate in the golf outing on Monday, September 19 at Eagle Creek. Reach out to Eric or Kelly to sign up or help with that registration. Kiwanis is all about kids, of course, and I'm excited that we are able to jump back into service projects. At Midwest Food Bank with the Perry Meridian High School Key Club on September 28. At Gleaners Food Bank on October 22. And Graham, would you like to mention some of our upcoming programs?
So in addition to today, we have some really great programs coming up. And again, love the fellowship, love getting in the room. Let's keep driving a good crowd, not only to see you all, but just some tremendous speakers coming up. So on October 27th, we have Drew Tower. He is with Project 44, and that's an organization I'm on the board with. And the organization, if you're not familiar with it, honors the memory of Andrew Smith, who played basketball for us at Butler and passed away at the age of 25 of leukemia. And so the organization really promotes bone marrow registry and has a goal of saving 44 lives through bone marrow transplants. Our organization has grown, and Drew is our brand new executive director. He also serves as the athletic director at Brownsburg High School. So it would mean a lot to me if you came out for that one. We've got a Zoom meeting on November 3rd with Kristen Grind. She's written a new book on Zappos. If you're familiar with Zappos, the online shoe store, which I seem to have a box coming about every other day. Living with three ladies, they come often. But the book is, it's about the founder of Zappos, who was a brilliant guy and basically succumbed to mental illness in the last year. So she's going to talk about the book, but also mental health on November 3rd. November 17th, we have Ted Green, filmmaker. Ted's been to the club before, done some great films. He's got a new one on Carl Erskine, who played for the Brooklyn Dodgers and is an Anderson, Indiana native. I just saw the film about a month ago. It's terrific, so he's going to come talk about the film. We have Pam Norman from the Kiwanis Children's Fund, who's going to join us December 8th. And we have Michael McKillop, who's the executive director of Midtown Indy. A lot of things going on in Midtown, and he's going to talk to us on December 15th. Hard to believe we're talking about December. It seems like, where's this year gone? So, Carol, if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today.
Please do.
Really honored today to introduce Coach Austin Parkinson. I mentioned when we had Mike Uremovich, our football coach, who's 2-0 right now, by the way. I mentioned it's been a unique year for us, and that we have 5 brand new coaches at Butler in terms of both basketball programs, football, baseball, and women's lacrosse. And the thing that I've noted, in addition to the impressive bios of each of the individuals coming forward, is just the energy they've brought. Even in the first few months, probably nobody has brought more energy than Coach Parkinson in terms of just the feel, the morale back in the program, the recruiting momentum he's got. So I'm honored to introduce him today. He joined us in April, and he had a tremendous career at IUPUI. He was the winningest coach. His team earned the team's first NCAA appearance by winning the 2022 Horizon League tournament, which, by the way, I serve on the Horizon League tournament host committee, and we had the commissioner, Julie Losh, speak to us, and she now really hates me because he's moved over to Butler. That's how big a loss he was for the conference. He was Conference Coach of the Year 3 times, previously served as a men's basketball assistant at IUPUI, and he had a standout career at Purdue University. In 2004, he tied for 10th on the Boilermakers all-time assist list and led the Big Ten in assist to turnover ratio for 3 seasons. His father, Bruce, is the all-time assist leader, so I don't know if they go back and forth on talking some trash about that at home. Who is a member of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame, and his grandfather, Jack, pains me to say, played at Kentucky, and is also a member of the Indiana and Kentucky Basketball Hall of Fame. So he's going to give us a preview of the upcoming season and share his thoughts on what it's been like being at Butler for the first couple months here. So Let's give a warm Kiwanis welcome to Coach Parkinson.
Sounds good. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, good stuff. Well, first of all, thank you for having me to be able to come speak today. I've been the coach since April, but this is my first really public speaking event since the press conference when I was introduced. So appreciate you guys allowing me to come and speak today. What I want to talk about is really my journey as the coach to Butler, why Butler, and kind of what we're going to do to kind of turn the program around. And I think one of the things you'll find, and maybe why I was selected for this position, has a lot to do with how I got here. It was definitely not a straight line by any stretch of the imagination. So as Graham mentioned, I grew up in this state. My grandfather, as he said, was an All-American at the University of Kentucky. Kind of a neat little tidbit. He was an All-American. He went off and fought in the war, came back, and was the 6th man on a team that won a national championship for the original Fab Five, if you remember Ralph Baird and some of those names. My father was the all-time assist leader at Purdue, and so for me growing up, I wanted to do everything that my dad did and beat that. That was my goal. He was an Indiana All-Star, I was an Indiana All-Star. I got to Purdue, and my goal was to beat that assist record that you mentioned. Unfortunately, my playing career didn't have that the same kind of maybe smooth start for 4 years that he had. What was neat about it was I started my first year at Purdue. I came off the bench as a freshman. My second year, I was a starter. I was second in the Big Ten in assists. The person ahead of me went to the NBA that year. My third year, what I thought was going to be a big year, and I was going to be the starting point guard, I actually had my position. Player took over my spot, and I only played about 8 minutes a game. And then my senior year, I was a 6th man. And what at the time seemed like a very up and down career, for me as a basketball coach has been incredibly beneficial. And I didn't know at the time how much that would be important down the road, because when I'm talking to a player that's maybe lost their spot or changed their role, I've been able to relate to and be in all those circumstances. Also played for the legendary coach Gene Cady. At the end, if you have questions and want me to tell some stories, I'm happy to do that. It was both very challenging, but also very exciting from the standpoint, a lot of what we do at Butler and the way I run my program has to do with this. When I got into the coaching ranks, I thought everybody operated like Coach Cady, that it was not just about wins, it was not just about academics, it was about the total person, which he cared very much about. As I got into the coaching world, I quickly found out that was not the case. And so I'm always grateful for Coach and how he operated his program and how he operated things. So I leave college and I'm going to jump into my coaching career on the men's side. I was under this impression. I played in the Big Ten. I told you my history of my family. It was going to be smooth sailing. That was not the case. I was a GA at the University of Indianapolis for 2 years. I was the director of basketball operations at Fort Wayne for a guy by the name of Dane Fife, somebody I played against. I made $19,000 as the director of basketball. Okay? Yes. So when I was apartment hunting, I found what I thought was a great apartment. They told me, well, this is great. You qualified for low-income housing. That's how poor I was at my first job. I went through that first year. And so as I talk about, I feel like I've overcome a lot, had a lot of highs and lows. This is one of those. Conzo Martin, who you may remember, played at Purdue University, was the head coach at Tennessee, California, and Missouri. He texted me in the spring of that year on a Sunday night at about 11:30 at night and said, hey, I'm getting the job at Missouri State tomorrow. I'll give you a call in the next couple days. Now this was a big deal for me because him and I were friends. He had told me if he ever got a job that I was going to be on his coaching staff. And so for me, the guy that'd been making the milkshakes and doing laundry and doing every dirty job you can think of, this was going to be my big break. I called my parents at midnight. You can imagine if you got a call from your kids after midnight. They got a call, hey, I'm finally getting my break. Conzo's getting a job. Long story short, he doesn't call me Monday, doesn't call me Tuesday, doesn't call me Wednesday. I'm starting to get nervous. Calls me on Thursday. Says, hey, I had to keep an assistant on staff. I had to hire somebody from St. Louis. And then the league really wanted me to take this young guy that played in the Missouri Valley. And I'm doing the math, and I'm like, well, there's only 3 assistants. Well, wait a second. What about me? He hired somebody that was younger and had less experience and no connection to him instead of myself. That was a tough moment. I don't know if you guys have ever had a hard cry, but I will never forget being in the basement of IPFW and crying my eyes out, because for me, this was my big break, and now, you know, it doesn't happen. In the coaching business, it's a lot about who you know. And so I started putting my resume into other fields outside of athletics and outside of coaching, and I thought that my coaching career was kind of coming to an abrupt halt. Couldn't survive on $19,000 for too much longer. Well, about a month later at IUPUI, the men's job, they had an assistant position open that should not have opened. Okay, that job was open the year before. It was filled, and by some crazy circumstance, that particular job opened up, and ultimately I got hired and I got my break. I worked at IUPUI on the men's side for 2 years for Ron Hunter. It was one of the best experiences of my life. I feel like I learned more about a head coach from him than I did anywhere else. Going into my third season, 4 days before the first practice, they fired the women's coach at IUPUI. And it was a really unique story. If you've ever read about, unfortunately, some of these abuse cases in coaching, it was really kind of the first national scale case like that. It was in USA Today. Their team had 3 wins. The coach was not the nicest person, if you will. They had scholarship reduction. And so they came to me and they said, listen, we'd love you to be the interim coach for the year. And at the end of the year, you can apply for the job, no guarantee if you get it or not. And we'll go from there. And so with less talent, with 11 scholarships, we had 3 wins the year before. We had 4 wins. I tell people that particular year, if you wrote a Netflix special about it or an HBO series, they would not believe you. They would think that, nope, the script is too crazy. There's no way. But after that, I ended up applying for the job, and I got the job at IUPUI. Now, there were 2 funny things I want to share with you that first year. Remember, I was a third assistant coach on the men's side. I went from being an assistant coach to a head coach at 29 years old, and I went from being a head coach of men to being a coach of women. So 2 funny stories. The first was, I would never coach men and women differently. That's one thing I would not do. However, there were some things I needed to learn. Funny story of a young lady my first year. For guys, you can tell them something, and sorry fellas, but I mean, we're all a little bit meatheads. We forget things pretty quickly, okay? So like it bounces off and we're on to the next thing. Well, I had a young lady in the fall of that year. I told her, I said, listen, if you defend and you rebound, you've got a significant role for our basketball team. That was in October. And we're in January of that year, and this particular young lady was not shooting the ball well, was turning the ball over quite a bit. And so I brought her in. I said, hey, look, you know, if you're going to continue to play the minutes you're playing, you got to reduce your turnovers, you got to work on your jump shot, maybe, you know, spend some extra time in the film room. She comes the next day, and she's got a really bad attitude, and I can't figure out why. So I bring her and say, hey, what's the deal? What's wrong? Well, you told me if I play defense and rebound, I'm going to play. And I said, well, yeah, and this is January. So when did I tell you that? Well, back in October. And I thought, holy cow, that ship has sailed, 3 months ago. You know what I mean? But it was a tremendous learning experience for me and how I needed to approach things. The other thing's more funny from, if you guys know Coach Katie. Coach Katie was all about toughness and rebounding. And we did these war rebounding drills, and we did drills where they put a lid on the rim, and we wore football helmets. And so, yeah, it was a wild deal. So I'm trying to bring that toughness, right? And one of our rules at Purdue was if you had the basketball and somebody got so close to you when you had the ball, you warned them, listen, you know, if Ed, you were guarding me and you got that close, I'd say, Ed, you get that close again, I'm going to bring that ball right across your nose, you know, as a warning. So I tell my young ladies, like, listen, if they get that close to you, you warn them once, and the next time you bring that ball through and pop them in the nose. First year coaching, okay. So we're practicing one day, and I'm watching this direction. All of a sudden, I see some kid just go flying across the room, and the gym gets silent, and this kid looks at me. Coach, she got in my airspace. I said, well, did you warn her? Yes, Coach, I warned her. Well, she didn't learn very well. And so we moved on with practice. A week later, every year they send somebody from the officiating to go through the changes in the officiating points of emphasis. The officials there, and this is a group of young ladies, they've just known me for about a month, And the official gets up in front of everybody and says, now ladies, the first point this year that we're really going to emphasize is swinging elbows as an automatic technical. And they all look at me like, who is this idiot coaching us? So that first year had some bumps and bruises along the way, and it was kind of fun. But I say this to say, IUPUI, I inherited a team that won 3 games. They'd never been to postseason play. And we went to the NIT 6 times, and we went to the NCAA tournament twice. But I do want to tell you how, again, I talk about that, it wasn't a straight line path. 3 years ago, we won the regular season championship at IUPUI, and we won the we won our conference championship. It was a huge deal. It never happened in the school for the women's program. Our players were excited. We were looking forward to the selection show. And that ended on a Tuesday. On Thursday, I'm doing an interview with somebody from the New York Times, and I'm on my phone, and it's bzz, 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 and I start getting text after text after text. And I finally end the interview, and I look down, and they told us that the NCAA tournament was canceled because of COVID. Okay, and everybody remembers that moment. Now, we weren't the only program affected by that, but you have to understand, when I took the job at IUPUI, for the last 7 or 8 years, I've had coaching opportunities to leave. And one of the things for me was I didn't just want to win for 2 years and then leave. I wanted to build a program. And so this was the culmination of that. And for our kids to not get to experience that was really difficult. So fast forward to the next year. The next year, and still a COVID year, if you were to go on Yahoo or ESPN.com, we won technically the regular season title. If you go to the top of the standings, if we were in any conference, in any sport in the country, but the Horizon League, we would have been the regular season champs. But that particular year, the Horizon League did this weird formula that nobody could actually understand. And even though we were on top of the standings with win-loss, we ended up being the 5 seed in our conference tournament. And so when you're the 5 seed and you play that championship game, you have less rest. We made the championship game again despite being the 5 seed. We had a lead in the 4th quarter, and we ended up losing and kind of losing that chance to get back to the NCAA tournament. Fast forward to this last season. We've got everybody back. We've got high expectations. We take Michigan, a top 10 team, to overtime at Michigan. We beat Iowa with Caitlin Clark at Iowa, who was number 10 in the country, a really big deal. But if you paid attention, I don't know how much you were familiar with the basketball. There was still some COVID stuff last year. We had to forfeit 2 games because we couldn't play. Well, every league in the country around Christmas time realized that this was an issue, and what they started doing is just making those games no contests. Well, for our young ladies, we were the only league, once again, in the country that didn't change that. So trying to get back to the NCAA tournament at a mid-major level, you really need to win your regular season championship. So we started with 2 losses, all right? Our kids went 18-2 during the regular season. We ended up tying for the championship, winning, getting the 1 seed. We get to go to the NCAA tournament last year. We get to have the selection show. We get to charter out there. And so it kind of had a happy ending for all those young ladies. And it was a 3-year in the making deal. Fast forward to about a week or 2 after that, the Butler women's job opens. Job opens, and my phone is blowing up, text after text. Surely you're going to be the guy. Surely you're going to. And I don't hear anything. It got so bad that I became a big DoorDash guy during the pandemic, okay? And sometimes the DoorDash people can't always find our house. And so I never answer numbers I don't know, but I answer because I think it's DoorDash, and I pick it up and say, hey, this is so-and-so from Power 5 school. I think you're gonna get the Butler job, and I wanna work for you. And I'm like, well, fella, I don't know if that's gonna happen. And 2, I thought I was getting my nachos. So, hey, I gotta go. Okay? So, a week later goes by, and ultimately, I was very fortunate enough to get this job, a job that I've really wanted for a long time. And so, why did Butler pick me? I think a couple things. One, being in the city at IUPUI for the last 10 or 12 years, we built a very consistent program that I think people around here started to familiarize themselves with. The other part is my connections. I've been in this state, essentially my entire life. I've been in Kokomo, I've been in Fort Wayne, I've been in Lafayette. And you're not going to meet a Purdue guy. I played AAU for Bloomington Red. Not many Purdue guys are well liked in Bloomington, and I can go down there and recruit as well. So they looked at that. I think the value system at Butler, they looked at the culture that we created at IUPUI. I had a young lady that transferred from Iowa State last year and started for us at IUPUI. She told the team at the end of the year, she goes, I just want you to know the chemistry and the culture that we have here and the number of conversations I've had with Coach P in 1 year is more than I had in 4 years there. And she says that's not a knock to them, it's just how much the culture, and I think that aligns, with Butler. And then the other part is we've always done more with less. I love telling this story. We had the lowest budget in the league at IUPUI. We had the smallest gym in the league at IUPUI. We had no marketing department. So our mentality, and it's the same mentality I'm bringing here, is we're not going to make excuses. We're going to figure it out. And so I bought a green screen. I bought a drone. We YouTubed how to do all these things, and we did all that stuff on our, and I joked with the new coach at IUPUI, so when you go down that film room, all those couches and everything, I own that. That was my own money. I put all those IKEA couches together. So if they break, I wasn't the one to put them together, but you get the idea that I'm the one that, so my blood, sweat, and tears were in that, and I think that was the same thing they wanted here. But for me, why Butler? I have found Butler is the most connected school I've ever been at, and I've only been working there since April. I cannot believe the level of support and the energy they have for their programs. As I mentioned, our values and academics. My teams were in the top 25 academically twice. I had kids going to med school, kids going to dental school. Those are the kind of caliber athletes, and we're going to bring in at Butler. That matches their value system. To be able to play in the Big East and play in Hinkle Fieldhouse day in and day out. And then the last part I think is a big one is I am so grateful I get to work for, and he's still Coach Collier to me because he recruited me. But I meet with him every 2 weeks, and the knowledge I get from him and the leadership, that just makes me better. So I'm really, really grateful for that. Now the big question is, how are we going to turn things around? I don't know how much you've paid attention. Butler women won 1 game last year. We played them in IUPUI and beat them by 40, okay? They won 3 the year before that. So how is that going to change? Well, the first thing is this. We got to get the right people on the bus in the right seats, and we got to get the wrong people off the bus. And what do we got to do? We got to bring in the right people. And that starts with recruiting. So we are going to recruit the heck out of the Midwest. I'll tell you the where we are with our program and who we brought in. But there's 3 things we tell every recruit. I want talented players with good character that love basketball. Talented players part, all right, I don't care what you're ranked. I only care, do you fit what we do? I see too often in recruiting, people recruit where you have a John Deere tractor tires, you got a Chevy engine and a Ferrari chassis, and you try to throw it all together. By themselves, those things are amazing. You throw it together, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We want talent, but we want talent that makes sense. Good character. How are you going to represent your family? How are you going to represent yourself? How are you going to represent your high school? How are you going to represent Butler University? And if I'm going to ride a bus with you for an hour and a half, or we're going to be in the airport for 2 hours, I got to like you. Like, I'm not curing cancer, I coach basketball. I want people that I can have great conversations with. I have a 5-year-old daughter that is in and out of my office on a regular basis. In fact, you'll like this. I was telling Ed this beforehand. The other day, my daughter came to practice, and at the very end of practice, I gave her 3 shot attempts. She had to make one, or the entire team had to run. And yeah, 5 years old, we're teaching them early. And she made it, so she made it, all is well. But I want good people that we're going to be around. And then the last part is the loves basketball. If you eat, sleep, and drink basketball, you're going to love playing for me. If for you it's like, Butler's amazing, it's awesome. Oh, and I get to play basketball. I tell people all the time, don't come to our place. Well, I'll be the wrong guy. We won't get along very well. And so when I give my recruiting pitches, there's a pastor I listen to that says his sermons are space-clearing sermons. That when he gives his sermon, sometimes it hits a little too close to home, and maybe you don't come back next week, right? Same thing for us. We don't promise things that we don't have. We want you, when you show up to campus, it's exactly what you expected during the recruiting process. Now, when you get here, what are the things that we emphasize? There's 4 things. You'll see this, hashtag for us, or for us in our shirts. For us is for us. It's not for anybody else, it's for us. That's our 4 core values, okay? The first thing is being process focused. We spend very little time talking about the championship, or trophies for that matter. We talk about doing things right daily, having discipline, doing what you're supposed to do even though you may not want to do it, or knowing what you're supposed to do, right, and trying to get out of it. We want to do that every single day. The other thing we emphasize is choosing habits over feelings. You may not always feel like it, right? You may wake up on the wrong side of the bed, but at the end of the day, we're going to choose the right thing daily because that's the process. The second thing is we want to have a growth mindset. Who we are today is not who we're going to be tomorrow. We're not satisfied. We don't have this whole agenda that, well, that's just who I am. If that's just who you are, you probably aren't going to fit very well in our program. We want people that want to soak it in, that are sponges. You've probably heard before, right? Mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. High achievers don't like people that don't want to grow, and we want people that want to grow. The third thing is being joyfully present. That's a big one for us, especially with our young ladies. Sometimes we find out that they have a tendency to worry about things in the past, mistakes, failure, tragedies, and give energy to that, right? Or they're so worried about what's going to happen in the future that they can't be here in the present. So we talk a lot about, listen, you can learn from your past, you can't change it. You can prepare for the future, right? And do everything you can, but you can't do that if you're not here, if you're not where your feet are. You know, you've probably heard the term precious present. You got to be here and now, and so we emphasize that. And then the last thing we talk about, we want you to be a great teammate. Okay, you got to be a great teammate. If you're about your stats or you're about individual accolades, you will stick out like a sore thumb in our program. We want people that understand that you're going to serve and sacrifice for each other. State of the program, where are we at right now? There are 7 returning players in the program. We were able to bring in 8 new players. We have 2 freshmen that I think are going to be really good. Jessica Carruthers was the runner-up Miss Basketball, Gatorade Player of the Year. She's a point guard from Northern Indiana. We got a young lady that led the state of Wisconsin in 3-point shooting, and so far might be the smartest freshman I've ever coached in Jordan Muellmans. She's from Wisconsin. And then we brought a couple grad transfers in, with us. So the positive part is oftentimes in a turnaround, when I took over IUPUI, we had to spend so much time on the attitudes and the effort and really the cultural piece. The neat thing so far is we've got great attitudes. They are so hungry to try to do the right thing. Now it's more about learning and kind of figuring out how do you win, what it takes on a daily basis. And so far I've been really pleased with that. The last thing I'll leave you this before I open up for questions is this. I would suspect a majority of you in this room have either been to a Butler men's game or go to a lot of men's games. And I think that's great. I mean, our men's program is going to be awesome. Thad Mata is an absolute home run. I can tell you they're going to be great. What I will tell you though is I would encourage you to come to one of our games and one of our women's games. My dad was in HR for 30 years with Delphi and Cummins. And when I was at IUPUI, he used to invite his buddies that only watched men's basketball to drive down an hour and come watch us play. And every single one of those guys would leave and say, man, I cannot believe how hard your teams play. I can't believe how well the ball moves. We will absolutely be back. And what's happened over the years is I get to see those guys coming and our crowds would continue to increase. I can tell you if you come to a game, you will enjoy it. You'll be impressed with how our young ladies conduct themselves. And we need that support. We need to get the Butler program going because the teams that we're going to play against in the Big East, they've got really good crowds. And the young ladies here at Butler deserve those crowds as well. So before I go, I want to open it up to any questions you guys have. You can ask me anything, Coach Katie, Butler, whatever you want, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. So any questions?
Well, for your first speaking presentation since April, I think you're hitting it out of the park.
Thank you.
So as you're looking towards the ladies' schedule this fall, are there any kind of marquee matchups that we should put on our calendars to not miss games?
Yeah, so we play IUPUI at home.
When is that?
Yeah, I think it's
Sunday. It's a Sunday.
Is it 13th? I don't have it in front of me. I'm probably trying to block that
Middle.
one out. It'll be a good one. It's interesting because there's so many players over there that I'm really close with those guys. And so it's always tough when I think about playing them. So that'll be a challenge. We have Illinois at home. So that'll be a good one. I would encourage that. What date's that?
She does run the program.
December 11th. So I would encourage those. We play at IU right before Christmas. We've got 2 home games, I think December 2nd and December 4th against Big East opponents in St. John's and DePaul. So we'd love to have you at those games. Any other questions?
You didn't mention UConn. Why didn't you mention UConn?
Yeah.
Because we don't play them until after Christmas. So yeah, we'll play UConn, and it'll be a good challenge.
I think we're all in debt to Title IX that made you what you are, and the fact that women are able to participate now. And the big picture is that, of course, they represent their gender. Right here in Indiana, Birchby was the one that helped create Title IX. You're a direct beneficiary of that, and your students and your team. And I think that's a great tribute to that and to the young ladies that are competing with them.
Well, I can tell you a neat story. We had an alumni event in the middle of, I think it was July, and it was great to have all the Butler alums back. But one interesting story, one of the older alums, and her name's escaping me right now, but she didn't get to play on Hinkle's floor. So when she was in school, she never got to play on the Hinkle floor. She only got to play in the side gym. And so they came to practice and got to watch and got to see that. And obviously that's, really sad that that never got to take place. But also to what you mentioned, what a journey and like where we're at now and the excitement of that. And it's neat because, like I said, our young ladies are very present on campus and I think represent the university really well. Other questions?
Yeah, I guess I've always wondered, coaching, how you deal with the uncertainty of your career. I mean, you mentioned Purdue, where Gene Keady was coach for life, and now Matt Painter's coach for life, but those are by far the exceptions.
Yeah.
You mentioned Conzo Martin, who's one of my favorite people too. He's been fired 4 times in the last 12 years, or last 15 years, or something like that. And in the women's game, an awful lot of turnover, Butler and other places. So, without talking anymore, I'll just say, how do you go into coaching and deal with the fact that it's not the securest job in the world?
Yeah. So Conzo's my buddy. He's only been fired once, not 4 times. But to your point.
Oh, well, he's been at 4 different schools.
Correct. So he started at Missouri State, and then he went to Tennessee, then he went to Cal, and then he went to Missouri. And to your point, I think it's really, you have to be smart about, you can't just take jobs to take jobs. So my 3rd year, I'm not going to name the school, but I had an opportunity at a MAC school to probably be the head coach. I was in the final 2, and they were really ticked when I pulled my name out. The reason I pulled my name out at that point was I felt like I hadn't learned enough as a head coach to make sure that the next spot I was going to be successful. And I think what happens sometimes you see, especially when you get to the high major level, how many programs, so if I was a Power 5 assistant coach, and I've been part of a team that all we've done is win, 30 games a year, and now I get hired at a school where they've only won 5 games, well, how do you know how to build a program? You don't. And so there's a lot of errors, I think, not just in the hiring process, but coaches, sometimes you don't have the luxury. You might have to take a job to get a job, right? But in my particular case, it's one of the reasons I was very strategic over the years. My wife and I have had some talks. There were some jobs that paid me $200,000 more than what I was on an annual basis. But did that make sense for our family? Was that a place that we could go be successful? But you're right. I mean, it's tough. My wife, we talk a lot about like when I fail. My wife's a designer. She designs luxury homes, and she's really good at what she does. But when she makes a mistake, it's between her and the building, the owner and usually the project manager. When we fail, it's on a very public scale, and being able to deal with that and handle that. So it is a challenge, but also, coaching's probably not for everybody. So it's a fun part of it as well.
I have a comment, question. Thank you for coming and speaking today. What struck me in your speech is just the comment about crying there in the basement in the basement in Fort Wayne. That doesn't happen. You're not standing here today. Unanswered prayers, right? My question is just arbitrary. You've played and coached in a ton of arenas. Any arenas that you're just like, oh man, this is something special? It could be architecture-wise, or it could be atmosphere-wise. Just where you're like, oh, that's a cool place.
Let me back up to one thing you said. You talked about an answer to prayer. I had 2 prayers. I prayed to be a head coach by the time I was 30 years old, a Division I head coach. I did not specify men or women. At age 29, I was a head Division I coach. My other prayer was I want to be a Division I head coach. I'm sorry, a Power 5 or high major head coach by the time I was 40. This year when I was announced as the coach in April, I was 40 years old. So that's pretty cool. Some neat places probably the wildest place was the old Virginia arena. They used to let the ACC students in right away, so there's no select seating. It was just going. And I was a freshman, and we're out there. I mean, there's pre-warm-ups before the fans typically get there, and then we go back to the locker room, and then we come back out for warm-ups that you see. And they were there, and I'm a freshman, and I airballed one, and they were on it. And so the rest of the time, I just rebounded for one of the veterans, and I'm done with this. I always like in the Big Ten, I like the old school arenas. So that's why I love, Hinkle. I love Minnesota's arena. I love the college arenas, Michigan State, Illinois, Iowa, hate Ohio State, Wisconsin, all those big pro style arenas. Those weren't my favorite. Penn State, those are, I love the college feel. Obviously the IU Purdue rivalry, you get a lot of crazy things yelled at you when you're playing, IU and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, we played in a lot of places. The neatest place I probably coached was I got to coach at in Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse, and the history, and right outside the arena they've got some their Hall of Fame and some of the Naismith stuff that's really neat. But I'll say this, and I'm not saying this because I got the job here. I would have told you this 10 years ago. My favorite arena in the country is Hinkle Fieldhouse. Like that's not just saying that. My best game I ever played was an AAU, and back before they fixed the air conditioning, in about 150 degree heat against an AAU team with about 5 high major players. I never got to play here in college. Purdue never came, to Butler, but every day I walk in, I feel like I'm walking into a basketball cathedral. So Hinkle Fieldhouse would still be my favorite spot.
Tell me how the transfer portal is. You've had a history of getting good people. You have 2 WNBA girl players that have come out. You build people. You build young ladies into not only good players but good women. Tell me about the transfer portal, how you strategize with that.
So one thing, when I interviewed for the job, one of the things I said that was a positive, we never had a player at IUPUI in my top 7 ever transfer. Okay, so you're a player that doesn't play much. Maybe you want to go someplace and play more. That's always understandable, but there's no way you could say that stat about any other school in the state of Indiana. And I think that's a lot of has to do with our culture, and that they, feeling like you're part of it because you're part of a team. How we utilize the transfer portal, we're big on the relationship aspect. In this class, so we brought in, I think 4 or 5 transfers. Every single one of them, but one, I recruited out of high school. The one that I didn't was a player that I had multiple connections with, and somebody that had gone to her high school and could vouch for her character. She was an Indiana kid. In our particular case, we're going to sprinkle it in with the high school kids that we get. Now, you'll see some programs. Do you guys remember when Calipari used to get the one and dones, and there used to be all the outrage, and they just rake him over the coals? That's what's you're gonna see some schools that will essentially operate, hey, we're gonna take 8 transfers every year. For me, that's probably never gonna be the case, because again, I go back to, if you're choosing Butler, you're choosing it for the culture. We had official visits last weekend, and I talked to the parents, and I always remind them, why did you pick this place? Why did you pick us? We're not about the flash and dash. The one thing on the women's side, one of the things you do is you go and take pictures. When the recruits come, you'll take a picture with the recruit. And our staff takes a picture, we put our arm around the kid, and we take the picture. You'll see staffs on social media, they're pointing at them, they'll have a mascot head on their, and it's stupid, it's ridiculous. And I tell recruits that, because I always say they're conditioning you to think that you're gonna be pals. We're not going to be pals. I should be your mentor. I should be shaping your life. I should be someone that you look to for the next 25, 30 years for advice. Now, when you graduate, we can be the closest of friends. And so in our recruiting process, we spend a lot of time talking about this is what you can expect, and this is what you're going to get, and we really try to hold true to that. Other questions?
As someone who has been to many of the women's games, I welcome you, and I look forward to the season. And it wasn't a matter of fixing the air conditioning, it was Graham raising money to put in air conditioning.
Buy that guy an extra drink then.
But it's open seating for women's games, and if you want to bring 10 kids from your kids' team or school, it's a wonderful place to bring family and kids, because you can sit anywhere you want, and every seat's a good seat, so we really look forward.
Awesome, thank you. She had one right there.
Do you get to use the Butler Bulldog with your?
That was my question too, so.
Yes and no. Yes, in recruiting, if the dog happens to be wandering through that day, you can, but I cannot call them up and say, hey, we've got a big recruit here, come over and take a picture. So, we had a bunch of visits in July. I'd say probably a third of the time that happened, and we were able to do that, and sometimes it's not. And, that Bulldog's got a busier schedule than any of us in this room, I'm telling you that right now. He is everywhere, so, sometimes he's not even on campus.
Will will name, image, and likeness affect women's basketball?
It will, it absolutely will, and I'm anxious to see how that plays out. You're starting to see it, kind of the embryonic stages of that, way more on the men's side, but it will probably affect things. I'm not going to talk a lot about it because it's such in the beginning stages. I don't have a lot of information where I can educate you in a way that you're going to, you know, I don't know a ton other than the kind of bare minimum and kind of what we're talking about right now. So, anybody else?
Wins over the season, I don't know if you had, you know, we're looking to reasonably get 7, 8, and then your point on the, you know, I grew up driving a John Deere, Dad had a Chevy, no Ferraris, but those different styles, strengths, weaknesses, how do you get those attitudes kind of work together?
Well, so that's kind of been why I've been so intrigued to get this job because, you know, I don't want to say I was getting bored, but like, you know, playing, you know, Michigan and playing Iowa, and, you know, I loved preparing for those games, and you know, I watch a lot of, you know, teams on ESPN and Big Ten Network and, you know, all those different things, and so that's one of the things I notice, and there are a lot of really good mid-major coaches that don't get the opportunities, you know, maybe to be a, you know, high major coach, right? Like, I'll give you I think he's probably had an opportunity, but the coach at South Dakota State's one of the best coaches in the country. He's probably top 10 coach in the country, and he's in a mid-major school right now, and they do an incredible job of recruiting to their system. Example I could give you would be Purdue, right? Matt Painter, you know, Sasha Stefanovic, right? Like, he recruited a guy that didn't have a lot of Division I offers, but he gets guys that fit their system, and then he gets a couple really good players with them, right? And so that's kind of the formula, if you will, you know, from that standpoint.
Was there something when you started at Butler that pleasantly surprised you, saying, hey, I didn't think about this, or I didn't realize this, you know, that you were really excited
I give you
about?
2 things right away.
And then I'm sure there was nothing that was disappointing.
No, well, so first thing is my second day, I'm over in the business school, and we had a recruit, and I was waiting for the recruit to come out of and some girl says, "Hey, coach," and I was like, oh, you meant me? Hey, you know, good to meet you. I'd only been there, you know, 2 days. Like, why she would know me, right? I've been at IUPUI 12 years. You know, that would never happen. The other thing, and this might sound silly, but, you know, we were always big on trying to maximize and make the experience for the young ladies the best that you possibly can be. And in our locker room, there was an area, and I said, hey, I noticed some of the kids were coming in for practice and really didn't have anywhere to sit other than say, what do you guys think about getting a couch in here? Is that possible? And I happened to walk in the next day, and there's a couch. And I'm like, if that had been, I mean, I'd had to go into IKEA, put it together myself. Like, that was a whole, so, but just the overall, I've just been blown away by how connected campus is, and I can't emphasize that enough. And we've done a lot of recruiting visits, and I've not had one visit yet where a person's been like, you know, okay, coach, thanks, but I'm not sure. Like, every one of them is like, hey, this is awesome, this is great. And so, you know, a lot of that has to do with Butler. I mean, nothing to do with me. It's just making sure we point out the right things.
Coach, one of the real disappointments for me on the men's side is the Crossroads Classic going away. That's, if you're not familiar, that's where Purdue, Indiana, Notre Dame, Butler play in December. It's public, but there was a school down in Bloomington that didn't want to be a part of that anymore, so that crumbled. And I'd love to see us play Purdue on the men's side. I don't know if that'll happen, but with your Purdue connections, would that be a series that you would want to get going?
Well, first of all, I think it's ridiculous that the school of Bloomington did that, because I loved it. I thought it was a cool thing. I mean, I grew up in this state. Like, I think it's awesome for those 4 teams to be able to play. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's more, there's more to it than just like, hey, let's play, right? I mean, you know, for the last several years, like my team, you know, right now everybody wants to play, right? It's easy to schedule. Hey, Butler had 1 win, so let's play them, right? But when we at IUPUI, I mean, you don't know how hard it was for us to get, you know, certain games. We would ask teams, and teams would try to back out, and you know, because it would look bad if we would, you know, beat them. So there's a little bit more to it than that. I mean, you know, as we continue to go, I'll say this because I think he'd be okay with me saying it. Jeff Walls at Louisville called me in the spring about playing. He said, hey, I'm calling you because I know you'll play anybody. And we did. We signed up for it. Then I took the Butler job, and the new coach there wasn't thrilled about it. So that was, I apologize to her about that.
Is Pat Mata, are you able to talk to him whenever you want and get any of his expertise that you might otherwise?
Yeah, first of all, he's been amazing. I can't tell you, like, if I was a high school kid, I would love to go play for him. We don't talk a lot about basketball X and O strategy at this point because we're both in a position, we inherited jobs, and there's so many moving parts. I mean, I joked with, I probably worked more this summer in 1 year than I did in the last 5 or 6 years combined. So, my wife, who's been incredibly supportive, I go home and I got to be with the kids, make sure that I'm doing my part as a dad. For him, he's in a similar spot. It's been more processes and procedures. Hey, what do you think of this? How do we do this? Something he might learn. He might say, hey, I heard this. What do you think about it? But he's been awesome to work with. We go to the Big East. The Big East does their meetings in Ponte Vedra, Florida. And so all the men's coaches and women's coaches go. And so I got to spend a couple of days down there with him and his wife. And, both him and Coach Collier and their wives couldn't have been more welcome to me and my wife.
We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Tell us about your assistants.
My assistant coaches. So that was one of the other neat things. So most of the time when you get a job like this, you have to move and all that stuff. I went from a 25-minute drive to 10. Okay. I was announced the coach on a Friday. I met with the players individually on Monday. We had the team to my house on Wednesday. My coaching staff I brought with me. My associate head coach at IUPUI, Latrell Fleming. He played for Bo Ryan at Wisconsin. He was with me for 7 years. He probably could have had a great opportunity to be the next coach at IUPUI, but he wanted to be part of what we're doing here in this challenge. Former player that played for me, Holly Hoopengardner, has the best name in all of sports. She was the best leader I've ever coached or played with. And I knew from the time she was, I recruited her in high school, she was going to be a coach. She was a GA at Florida for a year. I brought her back last year, and then she came with me to Butler. And then one I think speaks a lot about our staff. Kristen Woodrich, used to be Kristen Draven. She worked on my staff at IUPUI early on. She then got the head coaching job at the University of Indianapolis. She was the head coach there for 6 years. She just left this past year to join our staff. And so the neat part about it was, and I had to tell our trainer the one day, so we have 4 hours a week we can work with the players. We do 2 team workouts and 2 individuals. And these guys have been with me forever. We meet as a staff. Hey, here's what we think. We talk about it. Okay, you guys, they execute it. And so I'm over talking to the trainer, and I can see the wheels turn her heads like, okay, what's all this hype about this coach? This guy's not even out there coaching. Like, what's he doing? And so finally one day I said to her, I was like, hey, listen, when we get to the team workouts, you'll see me out there. I was like, but these guys are incredible, and they know our system, and they do a good job. And so I'm really fortunate to be able to have, a group that I've known for a long time with me. So, okay. Thank you.
Don't go away.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
This was really fun.
Good.
Especially, I think all of us are basketball fans, and so it was an honor, and I thank Graham for facilitating this visit to our club. We are going to make a donation in your honor to Any Given Child Indy, which is an arts council of Indianapolis initiative to ensure that all 22,000 IPS K through 8 students have equitable access to the creative arts. And as a final thank you for being with us today, I'll present you with a little certificate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. My wife will be appreciative of that donation because she is an incredible artist, so I will let her know that as well. Thank you.
Incidentally, we will not have a meeting next week because of the golf outing. And it's still not too late to sign up, correct?
Yeah, correct, absolutely, look forward to seeing everybody there.
Either to donate or to play. Donate
Is there a
services.
question in there, Karen?
Have a good end of the weekend, everybody.